So there kind of seems to be a lot of arguments lately about do we need fiber, do we not need fiber? And if you know me, you know that I usually kind of stand on neither side. Like I kind of view like both people are wrong in these kind of situations because I like to look at the actual individual instead of what all the cool kids are doing. But in this video, I want to help you understand some myths about fiber and that this fiber might not be the magical solution that some people say it is. And for those who say we don't need fiber at all, I'm going to point out some circumstances that might make you change your tune a little bit. This is going to ruffle some feathers.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So I got a great comment from somebody who asked like, hey, this guy over here on YouTube says that we don't need fiber at all. What's your opinion on that? And you know, with this argument, it seems to come about because carnivore, a lot of people have been seeing such amazing results using this diet. In carnivore, you don't really take in any fiber. You're just eating animal proteins and animal fats and those types of situations. You're not really bringing in fibers from vegetables or fruit and such. And a lot of people see amazing results, so then somebody says, oh man, look at these results I got on carnivore. Everybody should do carnivore. Anybody with celery in their shopping cart is an idiot because this is how we need to do it. And then everybody here on the vegan camp was like, oh wait, well, what about all the vegetables? We need these vegetables. They should be plant-based. And what about all this information about fiber that everybody knows? Everybody knows about constipation and cholesterol and blood sugar and blibbity blabbity blue. And just, you need to know just to shut up. Your diet is wrong. And you'll notice that I didn't even say which diet it was because whatever diet you're talking about, it's wrong for somebody. We're all different. There's never going to be a diet that's right for every person. It's never going to happen. We all process foods differently. We all need to work with our body instead of just doing what all the cool kids are doing. So what we want to do is we want to look at some of these fiber myths and understand why they're wrong, understand why there can be some benefits when a lot of people remove fibers from their diets, but then we also want to understand the circumstances where fiber might be really important. Let's just be a human about this. And when we're talking about being a human, we need to understand that this human body is not the one that our ancestors used. We have totally screwed this thing up with our non-stop antibiotics like candy and with our candy, you know, all the stuff that we do with this body and the load of toxins that come in and all these things that we have tried to do the right thing and really just gone the wrong route. This body operates differently than the one that our ancestors used. And so there's a lot of people that are really broken, and that kind of makes it impossible for us to take this one thing and say that it's going to work well for everybody. It's just not going to be the circumstance. So let's look at some of these situations where fiber is going to cause trouble and where it's not going to do the things that a lot of people think and some things that it really could benefit. So one thing we want to knock out a myth on is this constipation thing, and that's usually the biggest thing. Even with the people that are saying, oh, we really don't need fiber, they're trying to reference all these studies that say, see, it doesn't even fix constipation like you said it was. Well, yeah, it really doesn't. And coming from a guy who actually wrote the book on constipation, that one right there, I'll let you know fiber is not going to fix constipation. I've made other videos about why this doesn't help. When you understand the underlying causes of constipation, fiber doesn't fix pretty much any of those. And the confusion came about because if someone's stool was just moving a little bit slower and they're just like, I feel a little bit constipated, if you put more fiber in there to bulk up that stool, well, why wouldn't it move a little bit easier? But if somebody is legitimately constipated and some of these underlying causes that can create that, more fiber is just like trying to push a ping pong ball through a metal pipe. It's not going to do it. It's not going to help at all. And for these things, I'm going to put some links to some studies in the description below, and we'll kind of look through a few of them, but I'll put other ones that you can kind of dig through this further to understand that this is just absolute fiction. And if you're having trouble with constipation, I'm not going to get into that a whole lot in this video, but that book on constipation that I wrote is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below where you can get the whole thing totally for free. And that'll walk you through understanding what that constipation issue is all about. And then there's this thing like, hey, it will help balance out your blood sugar if you consume more fiber and you have a high fiber diet. And there is some reality there where when you put fiber in, it will slow how quickly those sugars will hit your system and spike your blood sugar and therefore your insulin. So there are benefits to that. But a lot of people get confused and just think, oh, well, I just need a high fiber diet. But most of these high fiber foods are this processed junk that's going to magnify the blood sugar issue anyway. So that's not really the right way to go about that. And same thing with cholesterol. If you're putting a lot more fiber in there, a lot of times the body doesn't have the ability to really break that fiber down actually and utilize it, so it's passing through the system. So when you're increasing fiber, you're decreasing things like carbohydrates or sugar or this other food that you're taking that's going to have problems when it comes to, whether that's blood sugar or cholesterol. A lot of times that cholesterol is going high just because the blood sugar and the insulin is going high. So when you put in a nutrient that's going to replace some of this other stuff and reduce that, then you have the ability to create some benefits there. But that doesn't mean, oh, I just need to increase my fiber and all of my cholesterol troubles are going to go away. If your cholesterol is really high, like legitimately high, a lot of times it's high because inflammation is high. A lot of times that inflammation is coming from high insulin because you're eating toaster pastries for breakfast. And when we're looking at colon health, a lot of people want to talk about you need more fiber so that you don't have colon cancer. I don't want to get into that a whole lot, but I'll put a link in the description, some studies that show us that there really is no correlation like they say that there is. You're not really going to find evidence that that's really the case. And when we look at the gut flora, we want to think about that, a lot of our beneficial bacteria in our large intestine here, down in this area, this is where this good bacteria should be. We shouldn't have a whole lot of bacteria in our stomach or small intestine, but this good bacteria in the large intestine here, they can really feed off of these fibers, especially prebiotic type fibers that are found in some fruits and vegetables. And so when they can have something to eat there, that really benefits them. And then they can kind of create these phytonutrients that actually a lot of people believe gives us benefit. But one thing that we want to think about is that this new world of the microbiota and all this gut flora and all the associations to all these issues, this real research into that area is pretty new. A lot of people have been talking about the benefits of this for decades, but the real research for this is pretty new and we kind of don't really know what we're talking about yet. And so I feel like this is important enough that you want to consider this a little bit. That a lot of people feel like when you remove all of these fibers, you can starve out these beneficial bacteria, and then they're not there to help us digest a lot of these foods and help us create like B vitamins and all of these other things that this gut flora has the ability to do. Help us with our immune response. There's a lot of things that go on in here that seem to be very important. So I view this as worth paying attention to. Now here's the thing, this gut flora for a lot of people is pretty shot. And they got a lot of trouble going on, and they have like all these bacteria in the small intestine too, and it's removing all of these fibers, I feel, is one of the biggest benefits that people are experiencing on a carnivore diet. And again, I'm not saying that you should do a carnivore diet or that you should not do a carnivore diet. I'm a fan of a carnivore diet. I use it with some of my clients when it's appropriate, but you have to understand that it is not appropriate for everybody. But a lot of people are experiencing great results because they remove these fibers and now they're not feeding all this bad bacteria that's in the wrong place. That's really magnifying a lot of symptoms for them when they put in these fibers and other things that these bacteria really go crazy for. That's really creating a lot of trouble. So people remove that and they do a whole lot better. The problem is now everybody in the carnivore camp is like, see, I told you this is what you should be doing. Put down the celery, idiot. And that's not really what's going on. We need to understand that with different issues, different approaches are going to be more appropriate. But this is an important factor in either side of the argument is what's going on in this digestive tract. Do you just have good guys here that you might want to babysit and help out a little bit? Or do you got a bunch of trouble and removing those fibers is really going to help you out? It's not just the fact that, oh, okay, I'm going to look at these people with IBS and I'm going to see that when they reduce fiber, they get so much better. So all fibers must be very inflammatory and everybody should remove them. That's not the case. With IBS, there's usually things going wrong in here, like these overgrowth type situations. And when we're looking at how our ancestors would have eaten, they don't just eat one way. Like a lot of people will test out a diet, like a carnivore diet, they'll feel much better, and they'll say, okay, this is what I should do forever. And that's not always the case. Carnivore, low-carb diets, ketogenic diets, all can be very beneficial with a lot of circumstances, but they all have the ability to create imbalances over the long term. And most of our ancestors ate differently at different parts of the year. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to eat this way all the time. They ate what was available. But now everything is available. I can type little things into my smartphone and I'll have something show up in my house before I'm done with this video. It's creepy. But it's also not how the body was meant to function. It's not meant to function with give me whatever I want right now. It's meant to function by, okay, I'm gonna eat what's available. That means that I'm going to change what I'm eating from time to time. So I try to cycle through the things that I'm doing. When I'm using carnivore, I'm not doing that year-round for 15 years in a row. Some people do great doing that. Others do not. I like to cycle things around a bit. I won't go into too much into the imbalances that those types of diets can create over the long term, but if you want to understand that, I'll put a link in the description below for our video on who should not use a carnivore diet, because a lot of people, when they start carnivore, they do awful. But if they can correct these malfunctions or imbalances, all of a sudden they could really get the benefits from a carnivore diet. But it also helps us understand that doing these diets long term has the ability to create some trouble later, even if it really created great results right away. So one thing that we really want to understand when we're looking at fiber is bile metabolism. And if you've watched any of my videos ever, you know I'm pretty crazy about making sure that you take steps to make sure bile is flowing correctly, because when it's not, there's a lot of trouble it can create. And reducing fiber too much for too long has the ability to create some trouble with bile flow. So basically what happens is when this gallbladder is storing the bile is this soapy substance that the liver made. When it comes down here, when we start to send the food out of the stomach, it's going to help with all these digestive processes, and then it moves through this small intestine doing all these wonderful things that bile does. But then a lot of that bile gets reabsorbed so that it can come back up here and be used again. A lot of these bile salts. So bile salts are within that bile substance, and a lot of those get reabsorbed and recycled again. One of the big problems is that when the liver filters all this junk and toxins out of the body, which are a lot higher in levels in today's world than they were long ago. We take in a lot more toxins than we ever did before. And when the liver's filtering out, it puts a lot of those toxins into the bile, so that the bile can carry those toxins through this intestinal trackway, and then those toxins can go out the back door when we poop like a champion. So if someone's bile is not flowing correctly, if it becomes too thick and sticky to flow out like it's supposed to, then those toxins don't really get taken out, and the body's natural detox pathway is now blocked. So at the end of the small intestine, a lot of these bile salts will get reabsorbed so that they can be recycled. But that doesn't mean that all the bile substance itself is being recycled and reabsorbed. A lot of the bile substance is what's carrying the toxins out the back door. That's why our stool has that darker color, is because of the bile. But it appears that fiber is what can really help that bile move out the back door. And when enough of it is not moving out, then more of that bile gets reabsorbed and recycled, and then the recycled bile starts to become a little bit more thick with all this junk in it, and the more it's used, the more thick it's going to become, and the thicker this becomes, then that's a whole lot of trouble that we get to see. So let's look at this study here, and that's kind of what they talk about in this influence of dietary fiber on bile acid metabolism. I'll put the link to that study below. But in this other study too on dietary fiber intake and risk of gallstones, they say here their conclusion was comprehensive assessment of the associations of dietary fiber intake with gallstone disease showed that higher intakes of dietary fiber were significantly associated with reduced gallstone disease risk. So when we look at this job of the gallbladder here, remember its job is to store and concentrate our bile. And that bile really needs to be concentrated so that a small amount of it can be more effective. More effective at helping us break down our dietary fats, more effective at helping us access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K, more effective at helping this digestive process and helping the bicarb and other things that come from the pancreas all neutralize the acids that come from the stomach. All those things are very important for our digestive process. And when there's gallstones, it usually comes about because this bile has become too thick and sticky to flow out like it's supposed to. So it gets stuck in the gallbladder, and then the gallbladder just continues to concentrate it. Remember, that's its job, is to concentrate that bile. So if it's not flowing out enough, it just stays in there and gets concentrated until it concentrates into sludge or into stones. and then we don't have that bile flowing down to help with all that digestive process. That bile also helps to make sure that there's not too many bad guys in this small intestine. It has an antimicrobial effect and can take care of bad guys that are trying to set up camp where they really shouldn't be. So that's very important. So when we're seeing studies show that this lack of bile is showing that there's more risk towards gallstones, that makes sense if this lack of fiber is restricting the bile from flowing correctly. Just because too much of that bile is being recycled and reused and becoming thicker and thicker. Now there's lots of other reasons that bile can become too thick and sticky, but these studies are kind of showing us that this seems to be a factor and it's worth keeping an eye on. Because when this bile is not moving correctly, we can't access all the nutrients in our food. It can lead to nutrient deficiencies. That detoxification pathway is really big. And a lot of people on the pro-fiber are going to say, oh, just take all this fiber, it's going to detox your body. And I don't really buy into all of that. You know, some fiber moving through this intestinal tract has the ability to carry some stuff with it, but I don't think just dumping fiber in there alone is really going to detox a body the way that it should. We want the body to detox the way that it wants to. And that bile flowing so the toxins can go out is the biggest factor when it comes to detoxing the body. So maybe the fiber, if it's helping that bile move out so that the body now has to generate more new bile so that it's not so thick as if it was just recycling the same stuff over and over again, maybe that aspect of detoxing and fiber moving things out is what's really helping the body detox. It's helping the body use its natural detox pathway, which is that bile flowing like it should. If bile's not flowing, we also have trouble with thyroid function because we need that bile to be able to convert those thyroid hormones correctly. But what's really important is to think about the form of fiber that you're using. We're not talking about like fiber from grains and like, you know, here's some healthy whole grains. Just because they put healthy in the word doesn't mean that it's healthy. We know whole grains are not healthy for most people. But we want to look at getting fiber from natural sources, not just from processed high fiber foods that have all these grains in. We want to look at like vegetables or fruits. And one thing that I kind of do myself is I tend to consume more fruits now. I used to be pretty against fruits just because of this sugar content thing, and I thought that that was a really big problem. But you know, we kind of change our minds when we learn more things. And one thing to consider for the carnivore folks is Dr. Paul Saladino was one of the biggest carnivore speakers and saying how we just don't need all these fibers and stuff. But now he's gone more to this animal-based situation where he includes fruits in his diet, and he says that he benefits a lot from the carbohydrates, and he may also be benefiting from those fibers, whether he's helping feed this gut flora, you know, giving them this prebiotic fibers that they can come from fruit, or just from the carbohydrates that are keeping him from creating imbalances that can come from eating zero carbs for too long. You know, and I like Paul, but just know that I don't really agree with everything that pretty much anybody says. I don't even agree with what I said yesterday. You know, we're all learning new things. We're just trying to do the best we can as we try to learn how our body operates and try to understand what's best for us. And that's what I really want you to keep your focus on. Shut up, phone. I'm talking about fiber things. I want you to keep your focus on what's best for you, not just what the cool kids are saying. You really want to look at your body chemistry to understand what's going to benefit you the most. So if opinions vary a little bit, know that that's okay. There's a reason that the opinions are varying. Each opinion is right in some cases. So it's really about figuring out what's right for you. Now, if you want to understand a little bit more about this fiber and constipation issue, you can jump over right now and check out our video on why fiber and probiotics don't fix constipation. I hope that helps.